Hey YouTube, I'm Blaze, and this is the ultimate guide for the ARC Troopers who just came into Battlefront 2. I'm going to go over their base stats, their abilities, and then finally how you should play them and the star cards you want to be using. I have just done the commando droids, so make sure to check out that video as well, and subscribe for more content like that. Kicking it off with base stats, he has 350 health. His health regen is actually pretty slow. To be honest, it takes a while to get going and then takes a while to complete. As well, the battle point cost is 2,000 and they gain battle points really fast, so you can actually spawn in as an ARC Trooper and end up getting enough battle points to spawn in again. Their base weapon is dual DC-15s, which is the standard blaster pistol for clones. However, the damage on this thing is not standard, and the way it works is you have either trigger or mouse button, and the mouse button or the trigger that you press is the blaster he will fire. So if you spam both triggers, he'll fire both blasters really fast, and the damage that comes out of that is truly absurd. And even though the spread is quite wide, at long ranges the drop off isn't enough that you actually end up doing more damage than the commander droid would do, even though the commander droid has a blaster rifle. And don't even get me started on the way that they can just headshot Grievous, let's say, and melt him in seconds, and just one of these guys is enough to challenge any decent hero player, let alone two. So yes, I think they need a nerf, but without further ado, I think we should jump straight into their abilities. Their first ability is a shock trap, which, like Lando's, they can throw it out on the ground and has a countdown before it detonates, and they can also manually detonate it by pressing the same button again at any point in time. And instead of Lando's Disabler, which will stun enemies, the shock trap only knocks them to the ground and does actually throw enemies quite far. So if you chuck one of these behind someone and then detonate it, it will throw them towards you, which can be used pretty well. However, you need to be at quite a high skill level to be able to utilize this correctly. Most of the time it's just using it for the 50 damage and the knockover effect, so you can quickly capitalize on the enemy's weakness. It does not reveal enemies like Lando's Disabler, just to note. There's not much to say on this ability apart from you can either use it defensively or offensively, so if you see a large group of enemies, chucking it in there and then detonate it to get some extra damage, and then maybe help your team move up and shoot them, or shoot them yourself as well. But you can also use it defensively, so if enemies are pushing you, throw it at your feet, or especially heroes if they're pushing you, and you can actually detonate it and then take advantage of them being knocked over. And now in this game they can't block or do anything whilst they're on the ground, so you can actually just light them up when they're on the ground. Take note, this does actually cancel out all of Grievous's abilities, including his thrust surge, so if you time this right, you can just completely nullify Grievous, and with such large hitbox, dual blasters will destroy him anyway. The ARC Trooper's second or middle ability is a scan pulse that repeats itself every 1.5 seconds or so, and that reveals all enemies in a short range around, and is a pretty long duration actually, so you don't need to worry about just activating this and then not getting the enemies before it runs out, because it does last quite a lot longer than, for example, the BX droid's equivalent. This is really best used either defensively or when you're looking for flanks. It's not really much to say here, doesn't really combo with anything else on the ARC Trooper's kit either. Just pop it when you're under fire, or pop it when you're about to attack an enemy you want to know the right direction to attack them from. The ARC Trooper's third and last ability is a power blast, where he charges out one of his blasters and then fires a pure explosive bolt, which has slight lock on over range and deals 150 damage in pure explosive damage. So it does not matter if you fire it at the ground next to someone, as long as it's close enough to deal all 150 ticks of damage, and it cannot headshot obviously because it does no actual projectile damage, only explosive damage. And the slight lock on over range means you can pretty much take out all the 4 regular classes. However, the heavy will need some follow-up damage from your DC-15 blaster pistols, which are actually pretty reliable at range as well. Although they can't be relied to take out an entire class by itself, it's definitely good for following up on that 50 damage to kill that heavy. The only situations where you should really be using this at close range is if you spot someone coming around the corner and you just charge up your blaster and fire it as soon as they get around the corner at their feet. That's a pretty reliable way of doing it. Other than that, you should only be using this at long range, but it does have a very short cooldown, so you can use this pretty much repeatedly and reliably at long range. In terms of the way you want to play the ARC Trooper, it's pretty simple. You play him like you would your regular class, however make sure you're staying on the defensive side of things unless you're flanking, at which point you just go ham with your blaster pistols. Take care, however, that you don't really have any defensive abilities, so it is actually pretty precarious. If you get yourself into a mix, you probably will die. Obviously it's not such a big deal because he's a reinforcement as opposed to a hero, however just if you want that survivability, make sure not to overextend. For the star cards, I would say Desperation, which reduces your ability recharge time, is a great one because actually the Scan Pulse especially, but also the Shock Trap are really strong abilities, and having those up whenever you can really works well. So when you're being shot by, let's say, a heavy, for example, each shot of damage will actually take back a bit of your recharge time on your abilities that are off cooldown. The other reason for choosing this is literally there are, 5 choices for star cards. and 2 of those star cards pretty much only benefit the commando droid, and then the second star card you want to be using is probably going to be Stalker for that extra health when you've got your scan pulse up, really helpful because of the health situation. But then probably the best star card you could choose for the ARC Troopers acquisition, so you know where your enemies are shooting you from. But not only that, but especially when you have an epic level, for 7 seconds you'll be able to see where that person who shot you is, and so you can use that thing where you see them coming around the corner, use Power Blast, etc. Just to note that this video does count as next week's release video, however I've released it early because of the update and all of that. Okay, I think that's going to wrap up that video. Hope you enjoyed. Like if you did, subscribe for more content like this, leave a comment. Bye.